Good morning. We are going to begin now a Sicha, a brand new Sicha, which, as we know, the minig is that we learn Pirkei Avos between Pesach and Shavuos, and this week, or I should say next week, of course, this week, corresponds to Pirkei. So we're going to learn now Pirkei Avos, a shir on, it's printed in Chelik Yud Zayin. It's page 371, the second Sicha. Mindy, I'm sorry, it was the second Sicha, not the first. The second Sicha. It's in volume 17, Pirkei Avos. Before we start, we want to give a very, very big shout out and happy birthday to our chief, the real boss, who makes this share happen every morning with his... This Sicha is all about being enthusiastic to a mitzvah. And we're going to learn a special chiddush that Ben Azai is telling us about running to do a mitzvah. So a big happy birthday to the producer of the share, Rabbi Avi Boaz. Big happy birthday, Shnas Hatzlacha, the Gashmis Veruchnius. If you want to honor him, go to his Hatzalah page, his Hatzalathon now. Donate. He'll post a link on the group. You can give directly in honor of Avi, in honor of his birthday. And let's begin. Okay, so Ben Azai Haverotz the Mitzvah Kala Ubereach Min Avir. Ben Azai says this is in Pirkei Mishnah Beis. A person should run to perform a minor mitzvah, and Ubereach Min Avir, he should flee from a sin. Mit der Hira zwischen die Mili de Chasidusa in Masechta Avos is Ben Azai nicht äußern zu ansagen, als man soll bechlal mekayim sein. Afilo mitzvah kala. Ben Azai is not coming over here, as we know, and we explained last week, and Pirkei Avos is milad de chasidusa. It's words for chassidus. It's not the letter of the law, hiros. So he's not telling us, Ben Azai is not telling us that you should know that there's a klal, you have to go run to do a mitzvah. And sich oishitten von over sein and avera. And we should be very careful to distance ourselves from an avera. Das ist doch ein Davar Pashut. As jeder Yid darf mekayim sein alle mitzvahs. Afilo a mitzvah kala, und turn it over sein chas v'sholom an avera, afilo an avera kala. It's obviously self-understood that every Yid has to fulfill all mitzvahs, even a minor one, and distance himself from transgressions, even a slight sin. So what's he coming to tell us? The mitzvah kala, it's obvious. A mitzvah you gotta do, and an avera you gotta keep away from. So the Rebbe says, no, the Hirof and Ben Azai is in them oifen for kiyama mitzvahs. Ben Azai is teaching us how to fulfill the mitzvahs. Heve rotz the mitzvah kala berech min avera. Nid nor zol min di mitzvah tan bepeil, nor men darf loifen mekayim sein afil an mitzvah kala. Und nid nor abhalten sich von tan an avera bepeil, nor men darf antleifen von ihr. Ben Azai is telling us how to fulfill the mitzvah. Run to perform a mitzvah and flee from a sin. Not only should we actually fulfill the mitzvah, but when we perform the mitzvah, we should run to fulfill the mitzvah, even a minor one. Not only should we refrain from actually doing the sin, but we should flee, run away from the sin. So the Rebbe asks, based on this, darf aber verstehen, euch der Inyan, as man darf laufen ton a mitzvah, is nicht nur a midas chassidus, nor a din mefurish in Shulchan Aruch. This that we have to go, this principle of running to perform a mitzvah, is not only a milah de chasidusa, it's an explicit din in Shulchan Aruch. If you look in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, Siman Tzadik, Sif Yud Beis, and the Alter Rebbe, well, this is Orach Chaim, Siman Tzadik, Sif Yud Beis, the Alter Rebbe is in Sif Yud Gimel. This is based on the Gemara in Brachas. Mitzvah larutz kishahelech lebeis hakneses v'chein lechol dvar mitzvah. He says it's a mitzvah to run when going to a shul, and v'chein lechol dvar mitzvah, and this applies to any mitzvah. Hein, was is der Uftu von der Maimer Haverotz the mitzvah als midas chasidus b'shas is achiyav menadin. So what's this chiddush that a person should run to do a minor mitzvah, which is part of milah de chasiduso, if it's a din mefurish in Shulchan Aruch? The Shulchan Aruch says you got to run to shul v'chein lechol dvar mitzvah. So what's Ben Azai being mechadish in milah de chasiduso? Also, we have to understand Why doesn't Ben Azai conclude that you should run to perform a minor mitzvah like a major mitzvah? In Friedrich Mishnah, the Gab is here in mitzvah v'hebezer b'mitzvah kala kibbeh chamura. This, why should we conclude? Because if you look in the first Mishnah uses the same expression. V'hebezer mitzvah kala kibbeh chamura. That you should run to a light mitzvah kibbeh chamura, like a chamura one. Be as careful with a minor mitzvah as a major one. So why doesn't the second Mishnah use that just like mitzvah kala kibbeh chamura should say the mitzvah kala kila chamura? And the Rebbe says, andere seine Tage goyres euch in der Mishnah the word kibbeh chamura. So some people are actually in their version they actually include the words as with a major one kibbeh chamura. But the Alter Rebbe b'Siduri is not goyres. When euch Rebbe meforschen nimmt it on the gear. So the Alter Rebbe does not support this version, and if you look in most of the commentators, also they don't support it. Mosman Zog, we have to say, as Avos be as by Zehirus in mitzvahs. Moses Zaina mitzvah kala punkt vi in a mitzvah chamura. So we have to say that even though when it comes to being meticulous with a mitzvah, a minor mitzvah has to be treated exactly like a major mitzvah. Or b'negei ritzah mitzvah, when it comes to running to perform a mitzvah, then the halacha is a mitzvah kala nit gleich to a mitzvah chamura. When it comes to being meticulous in a mitzvah, then it's the same. But when it comes to actually running to perform a mitzvah, a minor mitzvah is not considered the same as a major mitzvah. Und der Fall sagt, wenn also nur have the mitzvah kala, als man darf laufen afilu zu a mitzvah kala, und von dem lernt man, als man darf laufen mit nur noch a gresser ritzah zu a mitzvah chamura. So from here, Ben Azai says that you have to run to perform a mitzvah, that when it comes to running, there's a difference between a minor mitzvah and a major mitzvah. So, and he's telling us that you have to run to perform a minor mitzvah, and we learn from that we should run even with greater haste to a major mitzvah. Splight over nit verstandig is not understood. For was darf Ben Azai b'chal mitzvah sein le mitzvah kala. So now, based on this, why does Ben Azai have to add the qualification to a minor mitzvah? Seemingly, he should have said, run to perform a mitzvah and nothing more. Was meant jede mitzvah von alle mitzvahs, which would include every type of mitzvah. And he says in the brackets, und bemele wird das gemeint euch as die Ritze darf sein bei jeder mitzvah leut darges hachemer. So this would be understood that we should run to every mitzvah based on its stringency. Weil as da is nicht da hat gosher von kala kala chamura. So if you would just say run to a mitzvah, so it would be self-understood that we should run to every mitzvah with its stringency, since when it's worded this way, there's no emphasis on being careful as a minor with a major. You run to every mitzvah. Okay, so now the Rebbe says, so basically we asked the question in Aleph, this Ben Azai, who says, Haverotz the mitzvah kala uberech min avera, it's part of Milah de Chasidusa. And he's telling us that not only when you should do a mitzvah or keep away from an avera, but he's telling us the way you should do a mitzvah, even a minor mitzvah, run, and by an avera, you got to run away from it. So the Rebbe says, first of all, that's part of Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch says, "V'chein l'chol dvar mitzvah," you should run to. So also we have to understand why doesn't he use the expression "Haverotz the mitzvah kala kila chamura." So even though you're going to say that when it comes to actually being meticulous in the mitzvah, it's the same, but the running part, there's a difference between a strict mitzvah and a light mitzvah. So obviously that's why he doesn't say Haverotz the mitzvah kala kila chamura, because running is different. The Rebbe says, so why doesn't he just say Haverotz the mitzvah? Why does he say mitzvah kala? Say clearly you Haverotz the mitzvah, stam, without getting into the details. So the Rebbe says in Beis, the tam if they're hero. What's the reason for this teaching? Haverotz the mitzvah kala berech min avera. So what's the logical reason that a person should run to do a minor mitzvah and flee from a sin? So Ben Azai makes 2 points. Aleph, mitzvah gereres mitzvah very gereres avera. First of all, one mitzvah leads to another mitzvah and one sin leads to another sin. So simply run to do a mitzvah, because when you do one mitzvah, mitzvah gereres mitzvah. And why should you run away from an avera? because when getting involved in one sin, it's going to lead to another sin. That's one logic. And another thing he says, Sheshchar mitzvah mitzvah schar avera avera. Another thing he says, the reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah, and the reward for a sin is a sin. So the Rebbe says like this. What does it mean, the pashtus, we mean learned in the pashtus, simply understood, is there chiluk zwischen die zwei timim? What's the difference between these two reasons? The erste time is masber for was a yid darf laufen ton afila mitzvah kala. The first reason is telling us why a yid has to run to do even a slight mitzvah. Weil sie vet bringen zu mekayim sein noch asach mitzvahs. So the first reason is telling us that why should a yid run to do a mitzvah, even a slight mitzvah, is because this will eventually bring him to fulfill a lot of other mitzvahs. So that's what it means, mitzvah gereres mitzvah. Und der zweite Tam tutuf, as die Ritze der Mitzvah darf euch sein mitzvah der Mitzvah gufa. And the second reason is telling us that the running to do a mitzvah has to be for the sake, or should be for the sake, of this mitzvah itself. As die Ritze der Mitzvah darf euch sein mitzvah der Mitzvah gufa. Warum schar mitzvah mitzvah? Wie der Rabbi Bartanura teich, as der schar verhano, was der Mensch hat bei ihm Tona Mitzvah, was das drückt sich aus in sein Läufen Tona Mitzvah, is Eicha Mitzvah. So, like we're saying, the second reason explains that running to do a mitzvah has to be for the sake of the mitzvah itself. So the first reason is telling us, why should you run? Because doing one mitzvah will lead to do more mitzvahs. The second reason why a person should run the mitzvah kala is because it's for the sake of the mitzvah itself. Why? Because the reward of the mitzvah is a mitzvah. And like he explains from the Bartanura, the reward and the benefit that a person receives for doing a mitzvah, which is demonstrated by his running to do a mitzvah, is also a mitzvah. Or like it says in Chassidus, other vider pirush as the schar from a mitzvah is mitzvah, the tzavse v'chiber mit an ebersten was vet durch der mitzvah. Or like it says in other places, that the reward for a mitzvah is the mitzvah referring to the bond and connection with Hashem, which is achieved through the mitzvah. So now the Rebbe says, so based on this, it comes out as the Iker Tam is Schar Mitzvah Mitzvah. Was geht zu verstehen, as die Ritze darf sein mitzvah der Mitzvah Gufa. So based on this, it comes out that the primary reason is that the reward for a mitzvah is a mitzvah. That a person should be running, and the running should be for the sake of this mitzvah itself. Befrat leiten Pirush Rabbi Avadia Bartanura, as schar mitzvah may nicht der schar von der mitzvah zu welcher rotz, nor the Ritze Gufa. Especially the way the Bartanura explains that the reward for a mitzvah means not the reward for the mitzvah he is running to, but the running itself. On the tam she mitzvah gereres mitzvah is a tam neisef. And the second, the reason that a mitzvah leads to another mitzvah is like it's an additional reason. Is an afal when the hasbara schar mitzvah wird nicht peilen if mention sollte seine roste mitzvah so das tan zu lieb dem was in dem Kiyum von der Mitzvah ist abhängig der Kiyum von noch Mitzvahs. Was in Vergleich zum Tam von schar mitzvah is das an Inyan von Shloimy Shmo from the mitzvah bedakas al kapanim. Now, the reason for the mitzvah leads to another mitzvah, that's basically if the first reason that you should do a mitzvah for the mitzvah itself doesn't motivate the person for whatever reason, like most of us, so under such circumstances, he should run to do the mitzvah. Why? To fulfill other mitzvahs. Which means that in other words, you say like this. You say the main reason is, why should he do a mitzvah, run to do a mitzvah? Because for the mitzvah itself. Now, if that doesn't motivate you, think about that if you do one mitzvah, it's going to lead to another mitzvah. So the Rabbi asks a very pashut shaila. For v'asers makdim dem tam from mitzvah gereres mitzvah, fardam tam from schar mitzvah. If so, why does Ben Azai tell us the first reason why have a rotz the mitzvah kala is because mitzvah gereres mitzvah? That's the secondary reason. The main reason why you should go run to do the mitzvah is shishchar mitzvah, either like the Bartanura explains for the mitzvah itself, or the idea of a mitzvah is tzavse v'chiber, you're connecting to the Eibishter. That's the main reason why you should run. And if that doesn't work, Okay, fine. So you have ulterior motives that mitzvah gereres mitzvah. Gimel. He says like this: Noch ahira gefindt min when euch im Masechta Avos beneged dem inyan von Ritze and Avodas Hashem. There's another lesson that we find in Avos related to the role of running in one's Avodas Hashem. Yehuda ben Tema Eimer haverotz katzvi lasis ritzoin avicha shebashamayim. Yehuda ben Tema says that you should run like a deer to carry out the will of Hashem. Und die Eira von Masechta Avos hat der Tor und also ich der Alte Rebbe b'Shulchan im Madura Tinyana gestellt als Haschala v'Eira Klalis wie you said this from Orachayim from ganz Shulchan Aruch. This is brought down in the Tor, the Alte Rebbe in Madura Tinyana, which means his second edition of his Shulchan Aruch, presents this lesson as the beginning of, and like it's the fundamental lesson which is brought in Orachayim, that haverotz the Yehuda ben Tema Eimer haverotz katzvi lasis ritzoin avicha shebashamayim. Kommt es, as an Avodas Adam, the Kohen is an dod, drei yom when they find it from Ritza. So it comes out that when it comes to an Avodas Hashem, there are three types of running. The Rebbe is going to say there's three categories in running. Number one, the Ritza ledvar mitzvah was a chiyuv mitzvah, und der din steht beikr beneged zu Ritza lebeis hakneses. Nor danach is min meise v'chein lechol dvar mitzvah. The first type of running is an obligatory running to fulfill the mitzvah. This halacha applies primarily to running to a shul, and it's expanded, like he says in Shulchan Aruch, and likewise to area mitzvah. Number two, you have a second type of running, the yiditza lasis ritzoin avicha shebashamayim. Was das ist nicht adin, nor midas chassidus. Haverotz, und der Pfarr steht in Masechta Avos. Es ist aber azam midas chassidus, was ist nicht nötig in Shovel lechol nefesh. Und der Pfarr es ist eingestellt geworden in Tur in Shulchan Aruch von Alten Rebbe. And then you have running, like we said, to carry out the will of Hashem. It's not a halacha, but it's a matter of midas chassidus. You should run. And that's why it says, haverotz in Pirkei Avos. However, it's an essential matter that applies to every yid, and this is the reason that it's incorporated in the Torah and the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. Why? Because it's a midas chassidus, but it's shavu l'chol nefesh. Haverotz katzvi lasis the chain avicha shebashamayim is part of Pirkei Avos. It's a midah de chasidusa, but it's shaykh for every yid. And then Gimel, you have a type. The Yerof and Menazeh have the mitzvah kala, but the Yerof is amidas chassidus, but it's nicht shavu l'chol nefesh. And the Pfarr steht this nor in Avos. When the chiddush from the Ritza is mudgosh in them, but there's meisiv have the mitzvah kala. And then you have the lesson of Benazeh run to do a minor mitzvah. This is a midas chassidus, but it's not the same for every individual. And that's why it's stated only in Avos. And this uniqueness of this running is emphasized by Ben Azai by saying that you should run to do a minor mitzvah. So there's three types of running. You have a running which is a chiyuv. You have a running which is milad de chasidusa, which is shavu l'chol nefesh. And then you have a running like Ben Azai, this extreme running, which is not shavu l'chol nefesh. And he's going to explain. Dalit. So the last sif. Die Klal ist als Risus von Ayidin beim Mekayim sein dem Ebershons Ratzin weiß auf sein Simcha v'chofes l'malis Ratzin kenenei v'lasis nachas ruach liyotze. So this eagerness of a Yid to fulfill Hashem's will reflect in a Yid's joy and desire to fulfill what Hashem wants and to bring gratification to Hashem. So this eagerness is exhibited in a manner of running, and it indicates that the individual joy and energy exceeds the limits of boundaries. And that's why he overcomes his nature. Was der Pfarr strengt sich an über sein Teva und hilft Krogel zu tun die Mitzvah was schneller. So that's why, because he's overcome with this eagerness, so this eagerness is exhibited in a manner of running, and it indicates that the individual joy and energy exceeds his limits and boundaries. So he therefore overcomes his nature, and he goes above his pace in order to perform the mitzvah faster. Is shaykh nor by them, was statement am bilti rogel zum Ebersten. So this joy and which transcends one's usual nature to fulfill the will of Hashem as he's running is possible only for someone who possesses this exceptional bittul towards Hashem. Shas der Mensch fühlt sich als Metzias, weil achas kam bekame is meges daite v'chilek kovel asmi miskavet beinav. So when a person is a somebody and he holds of himself, he's proud of himself, and he gives himself honor, and he acts with like very haughty. So then, can attack a ton of mitzvah mit chayis and simcha, but the simcha is al pitam v'das and mele is simcha mugbelas. So he can still perform the mitzvah enthusiastically and joyfully, but the joy at the end of the day is a limited joy. Life neat, gate neat areis from the kelim. He doesn't run and he doesn't lose. He doesn't lose himself. Shaster, aber der Mensch steht in a bittel, kennt sich bei ihm der Werk in asim gebilt in migbelas, was drückt sich aus in Leif und Tani Mitzvah bis in an Leifen von Mashbal Atzmi und Mekel Gufay, al derf wie mir gefin bei Davan Melach die Hanago von Mefazis und Mecharke bechol is lifnei Hashem, was is gekommen mit them, was wenn ich leise jedem Mezei so yisi shofel beinai. And like when a person's in a state of bittel, so he's capable of going and having this boundless joy, which is manifested in his running to do a mitzvah, so much so that the joy will be expressed in a way that makes a person appear like he's lowering himself and thinking lightly of himself. That's what it says by David HaMelech, that we find that he danced before Hashem, and to explain his behavior, David said, I will hold myself even more lightly esteemed than this and be humbled in my own eyes. In other words, David HaMelech, since he possessed the ultimate level of bittul, that's why he's able to have the ultimate level